Didn't your husband die in the war 20 years ago? The young man's voice was hesitant, almost apologetic, as he stood on my front porch. I remember tightening my grip on the doorframe, forcing a polite smile despite the strange question. Yes, I replied slowly. He did. Behind him, a man stepped forward. And my world stopped. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share still feels unreal, even after all this time. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The kind that passes without notice when you're 71 and living alone in a small house just outside Columbus, Ohio. I had been folding laundry, my late husband's old flannel shirt still mixed with mine, though I hadn't had the heart to give them away. For 20 years, I believed my husband, Daniel, had died a hero. The official letter came from the Department of Defense, stamped and formal, informing me he had been lost during a mission overseas. No body was ever recovered. Just a flag, a folded piece of paper, and a lifetime of silence. I built my life around that absence. I raised our son alone. I worked 2 jobs when I had to. I learned how to fix leaking pipes and broken heaters. I sat through graduations, birthdays, and holidays with an empty chair beside me, telling myself he would have been proud. And now, he was standing 10 feet away from me. Older. Thinner. His hair almost completely gray. But the eyes, those were the same. The same eyes that once looked at me across a crowded room and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. My heart didn't race. It didn't soar. It sank. Because something felt wrong. He didn't call my name. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there, as if he were a stranger trying to remember a script he hadn't rehearsed in years. Margaret, he finally said, his voice unfamiliar despite the name I had carried all my life. It's me. But I already knew. And in that moment, as I looked into the face of the man I had mourned for 2 decades, one thought echoed louder than anything else: if he was alive, then where had he been all this time? I didn't scream. I didn't run into his arms. I just stood there, holding the edge of the door like it was the only thing keeping me upright. For 20 years, I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways. In my dreams, I would cry. I would collapse against his chest. I would thank God for giving him back to me. But reality felt nothing like that. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was careful. Measured. Like he was asking permission from a stranger, not from the woman he once shared a life with. I stepped aside without answering. The house felt smaller with him inside it. Or maybe it was just that everything suddenly felt crowded with memories that no longer fit. He looked around slowly. His eyes moved across the living room, the worn couch, the old wooden coffee table, the framed photos on the wall. Photos of our son growing up. Photos where he was missing. "You kept the house," he said. "I didn't have a reason to leave," I replied. That was true. This house was the only place where his absence made sense. Every corner held a version of him that never came back. He nodded, but didn't say anything else. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I walked into the kitchen, more out of habit than intention. "Do you want some coffee?" I asked. It was a normal question. The kind you ask a guest. "Not your husband?" "Yes," he said. "Black." That made my hands pause for just a second. He used to take it with cream. 2 sugars. Always complaining it was too bitter otherwise. I didn't mention it. Instead, I poured the coffee, set the mug in front of him, and sat across the table. The same table where I had spent years eating alone. "I received a letter," I said quietly. "They told me you were gone." He stared at the mug, not touching it. "I know." That was all he said. No apology. No explanation. Just 2 words. I folded my hands together to stop them from trembling. "Daniel, where have you been?" He finally looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw something crack through that calm expression. Not relief. Not love. Something closer to hesitation, maybe even fear. "It's complicated," he said. I nodded slowly. Because deep down, I was starting to understand something I didn't want to admit. Men who are lost, don't come back like this. And whatever the truth was, it wasn't going to be simple. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sound of another person breathing under my roof. It should have comforted me. For 20 years, I had fallen asleep to silence. But this felt different. This felt wrong. Around 2 a.m., I got up. Old habits. When your mind won't rest, your body follows. I wrapped my robe tighter around me and stepped quietly into the hallway. The house was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the kitchen light I'd forgotten to turn off. As I passed the guest room, I slowed down. The door was slightly open. And he wasn't inside. My chest tightened. I moved toward the living room, each step careful, almost instinctive. And that's when I saw him, standing near the bookshelf, his back to me, holding something in his hands. One of the old photo albums. He didn't hear me at first. I watched him flip through the pages slowly. Not with nostalgia. Not with warmth. With focus. Like he was studying. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He turned sharply, the album snapping shut in his hands. "Just looking around," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. I stepped closer, my gaze falling to the album. It was the one I'd made the year before he died. Pictures of us. Of our son. Of birthdays, small moments, ordinary days that once meant everything. "You don't remember these, do you?" I asked. A pause. Too long. "I remember enough," he said. Enough. That word stayed with me. Because memory isn't something you measure like that. You either remember your life, or you don't. I reached out and gently took the album from his hands. He didn't resist. "Daniel," I said quietly, "what really happened over there?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his gray hair. For a moment, he looked tired. Older than his years. "It wasn't what they told you," he said. "Then what was it?" Another pause. "I couldn't come back," he replied. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not break. Settle. "You couldn't," I repeated. "Or you chose not to." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." I let out a small breath. "No," I said. "What's not fair, is burying a husband who was still alive." Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy with something we were both starting to see clearly. There was a truth here. And he was still hiding it. I turned away first. "Go get some rest," I said. But as I walked back to my room, one thought followed me, steady and cold: men who survive war, come home. Men who don't. Have something to hide. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. That hadn't changed. For years, I'd trained my body to rise early, back when I worked double shifts, back when there was always something that needed to be done. Even now, with no one to take care of but myself, the habit stayed. Only this time. I wasn't alone in the house. I sat at the edge of my bed for a moment, letting that reality settle in. Then I stood up and walked to the kitchen. He was already there. Daniel stood by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand, staring out at the backyard like he was trying to recognize something that no longer existed. "You're up early," I said. He turned slightly. "Couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." I moved past him, reaching for another mug. The routine felt familiar: 2 cups, 2 plates, the quiet rhythm of a shared morning. For a brief second, it almost felt like the life we used to have. Almost. "I'm making eggs," I said. "And toast." He nodded. "That's fine." "Fine. Not my favorite. Not even sounds good. Just, fine." I cracked the eggs into the pan, listening to the soft sizzle fill the silence between us. "You used to hate eggs," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Said the smell bothered you in the morning." Another pause. "Then, I guess people change." I glanced at him briefly. "Yes," I said. "They do." We ate at the table without much conversation. Forks against plates. Coffee cup set down too carefully. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, just restrained. After a few minutes, he spoke. "Is our son nearby?" he asked. "Our son." The word sounded unfamiliar coming from him. "He lives about 40 minutes from here," I replied. "In Dayton." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'd like to see him." I studied his face. There was no warmth in his expression. No anticipation. No trace of the man who once held our newborn in his arms like he was the most important thing in the world. Just, intention. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said. His eyes lifted to meet mine. "Why not?" "Because you missed 20 years. Because you don't even remember his childhood. Because I don't know who you are anymore." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I stood up and began clearing the table. "I think," I said calmly, "before you see him, you need to tell me the truth." He didn't answer right away. And that silence told me more than any words could. So I turned back to face him fully. "No more, it's complicated," I continued. "No more half answers. You walked back into my life after 20 years, Daniel." I held his gaze. "You don't get to be a stranger and a husband at the same time." The room went still. And for the first time since he arrived, I saw it clearly. He wasn't just avoiding the truth. He was afraid of it coming out. Daniel didn't answer me right away. He sat there, his hands resting flat on the table, eyes fixed somewhere just past my shoulder, like he was weighing something. Or deciding what version of the truth I could handle. "I told you," he said finally. "It's complicated." I let out a quiet breath. "No," I replied. "It's not complicated. It's 20 years of silence." That landed. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his fingers curled slightly against the wood. For a moment, I thought he might stand up and walk out. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. "There were things that went wrong," he began slowly. "During the mission." I didn't interrupt. "When everything happened, I was separated from my unit. I was injured. They assumed I didn't make it." "And you?" I asked. "What did you assume?" His eyes flickered toward me, then away. "I was taken in," he said. "By people who didn't exactly trust outsiders." The words felt rehearsed. Carefully chosen. "How long?" I asked. "A while." "A while." I nodded slightly, as if that answer meant anything at all. "And in all that time," I continued, "you couldn't send a message. Make a call. Let someone know you were alive." His silence stretched again. Then, it wasn't that simple. There it was again. That same line. Different words. Same meaning. I studied his face, searching for something real, regret, pain, anything that connected him to the man I used to know. But all I saw was control. Measured responses. Careful pauses. Like he was still deciding what to give me, and what to keep. "You came back eventually," I said. "You're here now." He nodded. So what changed? I asked. That question stayed in the air longer than the others. This time, he didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring down at his hands like they might hold the answer for him. I couldn't come back before, he said quietly. And now you can. I pressed. Another pause. Then finally, yes. I let that sit between us. Because something about it didn't feel like relief. It felt like timing. Like whatever had kept him away for 20 years. Was no longer there. Or no longer useful. I stood up slowly, carrying my empty cup to the sink. The sound of porcelain against metal echoed louder than it should have. Behind me, he didn't move. Daniel, I said, without turning around, when they told me you were dead. I built a life around that truth. My voice stayed steady. I buried you. I grieved you. I survived you. I turned then, meeting his eyes again. So if you're going to stand here now and tell me you were alive this whole time, I paused. You'd better give me a reason that's worth 20 years. He looked at me. And for the first time, he didn't have an answer ready. I didn't push him again after that. Not that morning. Because something inside me had already started to shift. For 20 years, I had held on to a version of Daniel that no longer existed. A man frozen in time, young, steady, dependable. A man who kissed me goodbye on a quiet morning and never came back. That man was gone. And the one sitting in my kitchen now? I didn't know him. Later that afternoon, after he stepped outside to take a call, his voice low, his back turned, I went into the hallway closet. The one I hadn't opened in years. Inside, stacked neatly in a worn cardboard box, were the things I couldn't throw away. His military records. The official letter. The folded flag they handed me at the ceremony. Yellowed over time, but still sharp enough to cut through memory. I carried the box to the dining table and sat down slowly. For a long time, I just stared at it. Then I opened it. The letter was exactly how I remembered. Missing in action. Presumed deceased. Service honored with gratitude. Words that had shaped the last 2 decades of my life. I ran my fingers over the signature at the bottom. A name I had never questioned. A system I had trusted without hesitation. Because I needed something to believe in. But now he was here. Alive. And nothing in this box made sense anymore. I reached for the next file, old documents, copies of reports, notes I had requested back then when I was desperate for answers. Most of them had said the same thing. No confirmed recovery. No further information. Closed case. Closed. I let out a quiet breath. Closed for them. But not for me. That's when I noticed something I had overlooked all those years ago. A date. Small. Easy to miss. Tucked into the corner of a report I barely remembered reading. It didn't match. The timeline they gave me, and the timeline in this document. They were off. Not by much. But enough. My fingers tightened slightly around the paper. Because that kind of mistake. It doesn't just happen. Not in something this serious. Footsteps sounded behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I just kept my eyes on that date, letting the realization settle, piece by piece. Then I spoke. Daniel, I said calmly, when exactly did they say you died? There was a pause. Long enough to matter. Why does that matter? He asked. I finally looked up. Because now. I wasn't just confused anymore. I was starting to see the edges of something else. Something deliberate. Because, I said quietly, holding up the paper, the story I was told, I met his eyes. Doesn't line up with the one you're telling me now. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about a man who didn't come home. This was about a man who chose not to. Daniel didn't respond right away. His eyes dropped to the paper in my hand, then lifted back to my face. I watched the shift happen, small, but undeniable. The calm expression he had been holding on to, it cracked. Just for a second. "That's just paperwork," he said. "Those reports get things wrong all the time." I didn't move. For 20 years, I had accepted every word in those documents as truth. I had built my grief around them. Trusted them more than my own instincts. But now I trusted what I was seeing in front of me. And what I was seeing, was a man trying to stay in control. "This isn't a typo," I said quietly. "It's a different timeline." He exhaled through his nose, a little sharper this time. "Margaret, no," I cut in, not raising my voice, just steady. "You don't get to brush this off." The room felt smaller again. Tighter. Like the walls were slowly closing in on whatever version of the truth he had been holding together. "You said you were separated from your unit," I continued. "Injured. Presumed dead." He nodded, cautious now. "But this report," I lifted the paper slightly, "places that incident 3 weeks later than the date they gave me." Silence. "And in those 3 weeks," I added, "you weren't missing." His jaw tightened again. I stepped closer, placing the document down on the table between us. "So where were you?" I asked. He didn't answer. Not immediately. His eyes moved to the window, then back to me, like he was searching for a way out that didn't exist. Finally, he spoke. "There are things you wouldn't understand." I let out a small breath. "That's the second time you've said that," I replied. "And both times, you were avoiding the question." His shoulders stiffened. "I'm trying to protect you," he said. "Protect me." That word almost made me smile. "For 20 years?" I asked. He didn't respond. Because there wasn't a version of that answer that made sense anymore. I crossed my arms, not defensively, just grounded. "You let me believe you were dead," I said. "You let your son grow up without a father. You let us bury you." Each sentence landed softer than the last. But heavier. "And now you're standing here telling me it was to protect me?" The silence that followed was different this time. Not empty. Exposed. Because whatever story he had prepared, it wasn't enough anymore. And we both knew it. I picked up the paper again, folding it carefully, almost gently. "Daniel," I said, my voice calm, steady, "I don't think you came back because you finally could." I looked at him. "I think you came back because you had to." That was the moment. The exact moment I saw it in his eyes. Not confusion. Not guilt. Fear. And whatever he had been hiding for 20 years was finally catching up to him. The front door opened. "Mom." "I'm in the kitchen," I said. Footsteps. Then silence. I watched my son stop at the doorway. And I saw it happen. Recognition, fighting confusion. "Dad," he said. Not like a son calling his father. Like a man confirming something impossible. Daniel stepped forward. "It's me." But my son didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't react. Because something didn't feel right. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "They told us you were dead." "I didn't have a choice," Daniel replied. There it was again. The same sentence. Different moment. Same lie. My son looked at him for a long time. Then reached into his jacket. "I brought something," he said. He placed a printed photo on the table. I hadn't seen it before. But Daniel had. I knew that immediately. Because his face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. Fear. Where did you get that? Daniel asked. My son didn't answer right away. I ran a search last night, he said calmly. After Mom called me. He tapped the photo. It's you. I leaned forward. A man. Older. Gray hair. Standing next to a woman. And 2 children. Not ours. Family photo. Recent. Smiling. Alive. I didn't have a choice, my son repeated quietly. Now the room felt different. Not tense. Exposed. Because this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about a life. A full one. Without us. Daniel didn't touch the photo. Didn't deny it. Didn't even try. I can explain, he said. But no one asked him to. My son leaned back slightly. When were you going to tell us? He asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. That line. That line told me everything. Like what? I asked quietly. Like us finding out? Or like you having to come back? He didn't answer. Because both were true. My son pulled out his phone. There's more, he said. He turned the screen toward us. A profile. A name. Not Daniel. Different last name. Different life. Same face. You've been living in Arizona for the last 12 years, my son said. Tucson. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. That was it. That was confirmation. You weren't missing, my son continued. You were settled. House. Job. Family. Not hiding. Living. I thought it was better this way, Daniel said. My son nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. For you. Silence. Heavy. Final. I stepped forward. Not angry. Not shaking. Just, clear. You didn't come back because you could, I said. I looked at the photo again. Then at him. You came back because something went wrong. He looked at me. And didn't deny it. What happened? I asked. No emotion. Just truth. Did she leave you? Did they find out? Or did you finally run out of places to go? His silence answered all 3. And in that moment, everything collapsed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. Because the man I buried 20 years ago was never lost. He just chose a life where we didn't exist. No one spoke for a long time. The photo was still on the table. Smiling faces. A life we were never part of. My son looked at it, then back at Daniel. You didn't lose us, he said quietly. You erased us. Daniel flinched. Not dramatically. Just enough. Because that word was accurate. I thought it was better, Daniel said again. But his voice didn't hold this time. It sounded smaller. Thinner. Like even he didn't believe it anymore. For who? My son asked. Daniel didn't answer. Because there was no version of that answer that didn't sound selfish. You watched us disappear, my son continued. From a distance. From another life. Each word landed slower than the last. He didn't come back, he added. He replaced us. That was the line. The one that ended everything. Daniel looked at him, really looked this time. And I saw it. Regret. But not the kind that fixes anything. Just the kind that comes too late. I don't know you, my son said. And then he stepped back. Not in anger. In clarity. That distance was permanent. I stepped forward next. Calm. Grounded. Not emotional. Because I had already done my grieving. You don't get to walk back into this house and call it your home, I said. You don't get to rewrite 20 years in one afternoon. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it. There was nothing left. Because the truth had already spoken for him. And for the first time since he arrived. He wasn't in control anymore. After my son left, the house went quiet again. The kind of quiet I knew well. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt finished. Daniel was still sitting at the table. Not looking at me. Not looking at the photo. Just sitting. Like a man who had finally run out of places to go. What happens now? He asked. Same question. Different meaning. I didn't sit down this time. I stayed standing. Because I wasn't the same woman he left behind. You leave, I said. He nodded slowly. No argument. No explanation. Because there was nothing left to negotiate. He stood up, slower than before. Like every movement had weight now. Real weight. At the door, he stopped. I lost everything, he said. I looked at him. And for a moment, I almost believed him. Then I remembered. 20 years. You didn't lose everything, I said calmly. You traded it. That was the difference. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. The door opened. Then closed. And just like that, he was gone. Again. But this time, there was no grief. No waiting. No questions. I walked back into the kitchen. Picked up the photo. Looked at it one last time. A life he chose. A family he built. A truth he couldn't hide anymore. Then I turned it over. Face down. Because that story wasn't mine. I walked through the house slowly. The walls didn't feel heavy anymore. The silence didn't feel loud. It just felt mine. I stopped in front of the old frame in the hallway. His uniform. That photo. The one I used to cry in front of. I looked at it for a long time. Then I said quietly, I buried you once. A pause. Not out of pain. Out of certainty. I'm not doing it twice. I turned off the light. And walked away. Because some people don't come back to fix what they broke. They come back to prove you were strong enough to survive without them.